talking to Tarun Kanji, who just is a hot shot in the business space. Not much you haven't done, Tarun, and you've achieved a lot too in your very short, young life. So Tarun, tell me, what makes a culturally competent leader?
Well, look, mate, I think starting off, I think we have to recognise that we are in a diverse environment, and the whole concept of superdiversity is our life today as a country. And we, from a society and a business perspective, superdiversity is going to continue to grow, and from a New Zealand Inc. perspective, we have to be conscious that we're no longer just little old New Zealand. We have to play in the global environment, and that means all around the world with different cultures. And for us to be successful on the global stage as a country, which I'm passionate about, we have to recognise that we understand those environments, because they're the people that are here and that diversity here, and we can't be isolated in a cocoon. So I look at that and say, we've got a range of cultures, values, people with a range of cultures, values and experiences, and they all have their own individual motivators, and as a society we need to acknowledge and accept that. So from a leader's perspective, I think I cut it down to short, sharp bites of as leaders we must recognise, respect and be tolerant. And this is all about ourselves and understanding what's around us and being cognizant of that. Now, that's recognise, respect and be tolerant of the values, the needs and the motivators of the different cultures in our society and business. Because if we can do that as leaders, we can then understand how those cultures are thinking and where they want to go and what motivates and what drives them. Because what drives, for example, a Chinese immigrant versus what drives a Ukrainian software developer, culturally, personally, are different. But as an employer or as a businessman or a society, if we don't accept and understand that and are tolerant to those things, we are not utilising those people for NZN to the best of our abilities. And if we want to be ahead globally, and we can't play in our little sandpit in New Zealand by ourselves, we've got to be playing globally to be a successful economy, to grow our lifestyle, grow our standards. We can't do it all on just being insular in New Zealand. So I think I brought it back to recognise, respect and be tolerant of various cultures, values, needs. And say for an example, the Indian community. And it's fantastic to see that, and Auckland's a good example, but New Zealand now, over the last 10 years, has become tolerant of and recognising and understanding of a simple thing like Diwali, where it's come from, what was that little thing 20 years ago, or 35 years ago when my father came here, 40 years plus actually, to you look at it today, and you've got mainstream organisations and businesses acknowledging, accepting and celebrating that event, even though it's only a smaller proportion of the society. So I think it comes back to that, recognise and be tolerant. As the key bits that the leader needs to demonstrate.
So what do you think cultural capability, what do you think the difference that cultural capability has made to your own success in business?
I think for me it's about, because I think it's about being self-aware, and you meet some, I'll give you an example of it as well. It's being self-aware and then being aware of the people you're dealing with, and they have a different cultural set and a different motivator and a different set of values. I'm on the board of all things, I'm involved with an iwi trust, and so a brown Indian boy, Kiwi, involved in a trust out of Rotorua, and you sit down with the elders and with the hapu, and you get to understand and appreciate and learn how they think, why they think the way they think, and from that understanding and being tolerant of why they're doing that and respecting it for their values and recognising it, you can then understand, well, okay, how do we take it forward that they win and we win? And a good example, when you look at what's happening with the likes of some of the trusts and the iwi tribes and the like, in conjunction with China, right? I know that there's things happening, and I'm involved in a business whereby we've got a very cultural Rotorua asset, and we are partnering with local Chinese because they understand the cultural asset, but they also understand the Chinese out of China and the broad set and what motivates them to come to us. So good for New Zealand Inc. So it's about us understanding it. Right.
So tell me how that's changed over time, because there was a time where having cultural capability wasn't necessarily a plus. That's changed, isn't it?
Well, I'd say it wasn't. I'd go even further than that. Say it wasn't even a plus. It just wasn't recognised. It was just unrecognised, full stop. And I think society has moved. I come back to societal values because I think that's the key to this equation. And people are being more cognizant of those different cultures, and there's more around you. So you just walk down Queen Street and you see the different natures. You walk down the main streets of Wellington, not as much, but you see a different. Whereas you go further down to Christchurch, it's different again, but it's growing through the country. And I think people being more accepting, or New Zealanders being more accepting of those different cultures. Classic example. 20 years ago, you'd be struggling to find a Vietnamese restaurant, or a Malaysian, or a Thai, or a dim sum. Today, it's common, right?
But in business.
Okay, yeah, but I think that leads to business. I think that's a societal thing. Then you go to the business piece and say, okay, then having your workforce being a diverse workforce, and as a leader, then you've got to say, okay, I've got all these different sorts of people, and they're all in the same camp in my business. We want to make sure that we've got a harmonious, quality business. I get the best out of those people. And the best will be they work well together, they live well together, and so you've got various cultures in your business as a first point. And then the second point is then tapping into those people and opening up into those communities that you might not. For example, and I know this happens in a number of businesses, and I've been involved in the beverage business where we did it, or even in the software business, we had varieties of people in our business, and you talk to them and you understand about them, and you think, well, hang on, you've got a massive community out there that we don't even talk to, so let's talk to them through you. You understand that community, so you utilise that resource and that cultural diversity set inside your business to tap that market that you may not be doing and grow the economy. But then you can also go to the next step, and this is a classic example of the Indian community and capital into this country, and we have a lack of capital at growth stage technology companies, which I focus on taking globally, and trying to raise capital in this country for those use cases is difficult. However, you go to Asia and other parts of the world, there's an insatiable demand for our thinking and our technology.
But most boards are too scared to access that capital because they say, well, we usually get it from Europe, and whoa, Asia's a bit risky.
Well, Europe's not providing that capital.
So how does cultural capability assist?
Well, it assists in the fact that you'll have an employment base or a board base, and that's where it comes to having diversity at your boards, and not just having all of the same type of people, but having that diversity where they can pick up the phone. Someone, for example, and this is a live example today, an individual who is connected back into India, who was visiting New Zealand, or actually he's now living here, working, and we had a conversation as an employee type relationship, and he mentioned his connections back into India, and the bells rang. We should be connecting with those individuals in India that he has a personal relationship with, and they've got an insatiable demand to invest in this sort of country, in wine of all things. Your employee base is a latent base of relationships and connections, and if we're going globally, that's what we should utilise. So as a board, as business leaders, I've said this a number of times, mate, on a number of forums, we are myopic as New Zealanders, and if we want to grow, we need to be open and utilise the resource that we have in front of us today. And we have a wealth of, we talk super diversity, and I think in the paper we talk more about sort of Asia, Pacific Island, Maori, etc. Well, I go even further, and I go into, for example, my Ukrainian friend that I've been talking to, was an employee of a software company, and the opportunities that he's about to open up for us, just by a phone call, because we had a conversation. So we're understanding our staff base, and they have that connectivity. If you don't ask your staff, I mean, most valuable asset, you're missing out as a company and as a country. So again, it comes back to interacting with the team that you've got, understanding the team that you've got, given that we've got a diverse employment base today, whilst understanding and getting the best out of them as a group and what they can do to add value to the local community, but then also getting the best out of them all They know other people in other parts of the world. They've come from a different environment, but also we can learn from them. They have different thinking. They have different ways of doing things, which is not the old New Zealand way 30 years ago. But if we can listen and say, oh, well, that's actually quite an interesting way of doing it, versus how we've done it in the past, but New Zealand's not used to that. And that's where we can learn as good leaders to say, oh, that's interesting, that's a good thing that we can do. The other bit might be interesting, but it's actually not true to the New Zealand values. And look, you see it, there's negatives and positives of all cultures. And I use India as a classic example, and some of the negative cultural aspects that come out of India and out of Asia. But then there's a lot of positives that we don't tap into. So it is about tapping that resource and then using that resource to go global and to do a lot more for our economy. And if our economy's winning, we've got tax dollars coming in, we then go back and lift the standard of living in this country for NZ.
Thank you, Tarun.
Thank you for your time, mate.